All right. Welcome everyone outside of this meeting to the town hall if you're listening later, but welcome everyone who's here as well. I'm at about 60% like functionality here, so apologize in advance, but think we don't have a agenda per se, but wanted to go over our newsletter, I think. And Crystal, is that what you had in mind? Okay. So
Yep.
we can start there, and then I have some things that are more open-ended that I'd like to talk about if possible. And if anyone, did everyone see the Slido thing link? I'll put it in the chat, but that's a good way to just like post questions or topics as we go. That, you know, if you don't want to like interrupt the conversation, what we're talking about now, but something occurs to you, you can just post it there.
And Elton John put a really good link up yesterday in one of the channels about Italic's latest article on group stuff. So if we have time, we can wander in there at some point, because that'd be a really good conversation to float through.
Okay, cool. I didn't see that.
And then I just want to say, like, welcome to a few new members this week. We saw people coming in, and we're going to see more people coming in next week because we're on the ground at all these places. So anyway, these are designed to kind of give you an update on what's happening, meet some of the founders and community and just the whole group. And then we're going to dive into like just these ongoing topics to kind of just make this thing flourish. So that's just a little statement here. Hello, welcome.
Yes, thank you for being the voice of people who are new to the space. I always forget. Crystal, you want to go over the newsletter?
Sure. So, I mean, the big news is that our presentation in LA tomorrow. The title is "Even if Web3 is full of scams, the part that isn't might just change everything." So I'm really bummed I'm not going to be there, but I'm very excited that y'all are doing this. So if someone could please record it so I can see it. But I'm really excited to see, you know, just a roundtable discussion. It's going to be set up as a panel. Eureka John is going to be interviewing Keith and Eric, and they're going to be talking about a lot of the, you know, a lot of the sticking points for journalists looking to venture into Web3. And as we're seeing right now, Spencer with the DAO Coalition, we'll get to that in a minute, but you know, there's a lot of legislation that's getting ready to happen, and a lot of the journalists covering this stuff in mainstream media don't have language for what they're covering or a deeper understanding of it, and that can really affect legislation that will then impact all of our little missions here and our big missions here. So I think that's just a big thing to put a pin in that we'll be circling back to a lot. Oh, and we have a social meetup. It's our first real social gathering Thursday evening. It's in the newsletter. It's also on our Twitter account, and Jennifer has been spearheading that one. So Jennifer, do you want to hop in and talk about that real quick?
Hey, yes, actually it's Friday night.
Sorry.
That's okay. Yeah, I mean, it's really, we're welcoming all Web3 and Web3 curious journalists that are curious about Web3 tools. And it's just going to be a casual meetup and chat and dive into the topics. But we're going to do it at the library bar, downtown LA, just after ONA's full day of sessions. So yeah, we're excited to like have this little meetup. Although you guys have had meetups in the past, so informal meetups. Yeah, hopefully we'll have more of those. So yeah, welcome you guys to join if anybody's in LA that hears this.
Yeah, we'll definitely have more of those. And at some point when the dust settles from this, we're going to have a conversation about ETH Denver coming up very soon. So I'd like to start planning for that one. Next, we have our Git Coin Grant. So I think that wraps up in like 36 hours or so. So if you haven't had a chance to go to Gitcoin, go ahead and do some supporting of grants. Even if you just donate $1 with quadratic funding, it will amplify the actual donation quite a bit. We've been a little quiet with ours this time. I think next time we're going to ramp up and maybe get a little more shilling of ourselves. As journalists, we're not really wired for that, but we have to suck it up and do it. And then we have our town hall and our Twitter spaces from last week, which is just a really good open conversation. Rena from News 3 and Deepa from Impact DAO Media hopped in and have just had a really good conversation. We were able to connect them with Spencer and also with the DAO Coalition that Spencer, you started that, right? Or was that you and Lobby 3 initiative?
It was me and the lead from City DAO, Stuttgart. He's with the City DAO Public Affairs Outreach Guild, I think. Started that
Do you want
a few
to tell
months ago.
us? You want to tell us more about it? Because that's where I was going to head, but you can just, you're well more informed than I am.
Sure, yeah. So it was maybe 5 or 6 months ago. I think we connected through Lobby 3. I think he's also a Lobby 3 token holder. And we were both kind of talking about ways to connect DAOs through representatives in structures that can have kind of initiatives across DAOs and have multiple DAOs coordinate in larger initiatives. And we just kind of started nucleating a little group of DAO representatives. And, you know, our kind of mission and our sense of where this was going is, you know, change direction as most of these projects do over the last few months. And we're at the point now where we have a little under 30 DAOs in this group and a few non-DAO organizations like research groups. We just brought on Impact DAO Media and DAO Research Collective. So like we're still in this preliminary phase where we're just building up membership and getting a sense of what the DAO ecosystem really needs and like what kind of advocacy should be done on behalf of this ecosystem. I think we're still in like a diagnosis phase, I think. And plus it's super unwieldy. It's like we're herding cat herders. But it's exciting and we're making progress and I'm glad that JournoDAO is a part of it now.
Yeah, I'm really excited about that. And I like that, herding the cat herders. That's like meta right there. Some next level shit. And very accurate.
Yeah.
Let's see. And then our Treasury Activity, there's a post on our forum about reimbursement for some of the stuff that's happened recently, mostly the expenses for ONA for those who are traveling, and then our incorporation as a C Corp. And I think a couple little business bits and bobbles for that. So if you want to see the conversation happening over there, the link is in the newsletter too. And that should be it.
And I'll just say real quick, with the C Corp, I think is just like part of this story, and like instead of, you know, hemming and hawing over, you know, what entity fits us best at this stage, we just sort of took the practical short-term approach of like, this helps us get the things done that we need done right now, but it doesn't really preclude us from having, you know, a different nonprofit would make more sense, but has its own downsides. And I just heard in a podcast that I guess a lot of philanthropic organizations are more and more doing LLCs and not necessarily the strict nonprofit route. So that's kind of interesting. I don't think we're alone in wanting a little bit more flexibility with how we operate.
And that's actually also in the Vitalik article that John posted in our server. And he talks about that at the very end of that article. It talks about how, you know, with the DAO's evolution, especially the smaller DAOs, having some level of centralization that mirrors a corporation does help the DAO itself be more nimble and react to things. And I think in impact DAOs, that's more important than necessarily technical DAOs, because we're not building infrastructure. We actually need to respond to things like legislation that's coming through or whatever, and that we have to be able to move fast. So as we evolve, we can evolve into, you know, incorporating the decentralization that keeps us, you know, secure and makes us a DAO, but we can also leverage the worlds that we already live in. So.
Infi, it looks like you have your hand up.
Oh yeah, and I just wanted to add to that. It quickly reminded me of these two beautiful articles I've read. The first one's Progressive Decentralization by A16Z. I've linked it in the chat, but it talks about something similar. This was back when we were sort of deciding, you know, like how to structure a project. And so this really made a lot of sense. Like instead of just fake pretending or just trying to be a DAO from day one, right? Like you need some kind of like a base to build a community around, and that base can only be created by quick iterations, which is done by close-knit teams with some hierarchy. So yeah, I'll totally agree with that. Just wanted to share this article.
Yeah, I think I've seen that before, but it's good to, I don't think I knew much about DAOs when I read it last time. Cool. And John, do you kind of want to just speak to how you thought that article might apply to JournoDAO, or what it made you think of?
Sure. Yeah. I don't know. I'm getting more and more of a sense, just in the DAO ecosystem of just that there's definitely a need for some overarching kind of umbrella organizations, and I think there's a good place that JournoDAO might really fit for that. Honestly, I think, I don't know, like I see a lot of projects being talked about in JournoDAO, and I think they're all valid and definitely worth pursuing. And but I also just wonder, like, is it going to be too hard to do much with so much in different avenues? But there's definitely like a need for journalism, some sort of representative or some sort of entity that is going to, I don't know, have the banner for journalism in Web3. I think, I don't know, I'm bullish on it because I hear a bunch of stuff in other things and other talking about DAOs and essentially not really seeing their fit and where they belong and their purpose. And I kind of feel like JournoDAO is one of the few that truly has like a really good purpose. So it makes it, it makes me feel like I think there's something here. We're on the right track of something. But reading Vitalik's article, it seemed to kind of really fit that kind of narrative.
Yeah, that's something we saw, Keith and I saw at MCon a lot. They kept coming back to that same thing that John just said. And one of the DAOs that I contribute to, All for Climate, I'm not super active in there anymore, but they did that same structure where they have this overarching umbrella of climate activism and then individual pods. And the individual pods were like artists and writers and solar punks. And then they collectively formed in the server and then ended up with their own wallets, with their own multi-sigs, and then can now branch off. They even have their own special events, have their own GR15s and everything. So it's fascinating because they can leverage the collective of the climate, All for Climate umbrella, but then they can also take an initiative that is necessary, has been identified in that DAO, and then run with it on their own. Then the core group of that DAO doesn't have to be splintered in a way where it dilutes the heart of it. So I think that's a very logical evolution for impact DAOs.
Mhm. Yeah, that's a good way to put it. I also kind of, well, first of all, hey, Eric, are you there? Nope. Guessing conference Wi-Fi might be a problem, but I kind of view it as like we have an embassy in like the Web3 world for people who are interested in journalism, and we have an embassy in the journalism world for people who are interested about Web3, and then they just, at the very top level, they come to JournoDAO at like, I'm interested in those two things, so I'm here. And now what do I do? And then we have like, all these different groups and projects that we kind of have visibility into, and we give those projects, help until they kind of like can grow and fend for themselves or whatever. And then, yeah, kind of like what you're saying, Crystal, then they're kind of off to the races, and then we can like move resources to like other things, but then still keep that relationship for people who, come in and then would fit really well with like one of these spin-off DAOs or projects.
Would you say that's like sub-DAO? Setup structures, like, you know, how they sub-DAO structures?
Somewhat, I think it kind of depends on how it ends up organically growing. Because I think eventually they're going to want, depending on the actual individual pod, they're going to want their own infrastructure. So it could be both, really.
Yeah, it's kind of frustrating how few labels you can and structure you can put on these things, but then I feel like it's necessary to like allow them to form something like more interesting than what's been done before, or else we'll just kind of print out similar organizations, similar products, that sort of thing. But
yeah, and two, sometimes those little pods have their own energy, and if they can't get the resources they need from the core energy because there's just not enough humans involved, then they can run with that energy and not be held back by the bigger group. I think that's creating the space for that is also really important in this kind of ecosystem.
mm-hmm. I mean, I'm kind of interested in getting like more specific about that and seeing what you all think about. I don't know, like what would like a permanent position for like somebody who works at JournoDAO, like what would that look like? I think that's something that Crystal and I were talking about, because I think, you know, several of us would like to just have this be our job instead of a side gig or whatever. And so I think it's fun and interesting and also kind of necessary to talk it out with the group of like what that would look like. And I think the most compelling thing that I heard, I think Crystal agrees, is was it the, oh shoot, now I'm blanking. It's really popular DAO where they just have like however many seats of the core or founding team or whatever they have, they all get like the same salary, and that's just like done. And I think like I kind of like the idea of like paying everyone well and the same or something. Yeah, Infi, what do you think?
Well, that's like, I mean, the direction you're going in, and it's interesting you're mentioning that, because like the folks at DAO House, they had, I don't know if you're aware about that, it's like a platform where you sort of create DAOs. So, I mean, the folks there, they were sort of experimenting with this kind of a structure wherein, you know, so they were thinking that, okay, fine, if there are individuals who are doing this full time, do we give them a regular salary? Do we have like a variable payment structure, or do we have a mix of both? And so they basically arrived at this, you know, this really well fleshed out contributor reward, you know, something like a scheme or a program. And what I specifically loved about it was not only did it mention very clearly, transparent, that, okay, you know what, this is the member, this is what a full-time member looks like, this is the kind of time commitment they have, this is the kind of output they bring, and this is the kind of payments we give them. Obviously, that was there. What I especially liked was how they also gave the path for literally newcomers to become full-time contributors. So they were like, okay, this is what a full-time contributor looks like, and this is what they do, so on and so forth. But also, if you're here, okay, if you want to reach here, you start off by this, you do X, you do Y, you level up, you do Z. So I mean, we could definitely, like, you guys could definitely, I'll link it more here, but that's something that could be explored for JournoDAO as well.
Yeah, I like that. Something that's like a clear way to go from like zero to full-time, and along the way you kind of like show everyone that you're like mission aligned, and and then like progressively kind of incorporate yourself into the DAO. Yeah, and I think Crystal and I were really talking about like the bounty structure. I think is like really not ideal just from like a human standpoint of like only getting paid like when you're done with something, and then potentially like competing with other people, and like maybe your thing isn't picked and like you don't get paid at all, or like whatever. There's a lot of bad models out there, and so I think it's it's always been my preference to like accidentally pay somebody too much for like not doing like theoretically like enough work than like being worried about, like, oh, did you really work that hard? Like, are you really earning that? Like, I don't know. That sort of skepticism just seems like the wrong tone to take.
I think too, there's some really good mechanisms that we can deploy, like, token streaming and like a combination of like, human guidance and also token streaming at the same time, so that you're getting paid as you go, as you deliver, submit deliverables. So that like a longer term project is chunked out, and then those token streams can be, accessed as the work continues to go. I think too, in the context of how we're talking about it, the full-time core really does end up being strategic advisors in this type of pod scenario. So I think that's also something to keep in mind too. Like, you'll have strategic advisors, and you're also going to have a layer of, member contributors who are actively, making videos and podcasts and content and, physically building. So.
Yeah, Infi, you had something to say.
Yeah, I'd go ahead, but I saw Spencer unmute themselves, so I would let them go.
Yeah, thank you. I was going to suggest if we keep moving in the direction of an incubator and a professional network, then we could have roles for project managers for a given project being incubated. Like if we keep moving in the direction of the financial investigations thing. I mean, I guess that's kind of an exception because that's sort of being managed outside of JournoDAO, and they're kind of like it's an overlap there. But maybe there could be a project manager role for incubated projects that are within JournoDAO a bit more.
Yeah, I think so. Infi, you want to go?
Oh yeah, no, just wanted to like add something to what Crystal mentioned before. But yeah, Spencer mentioned something interesting about having project managers. So I feel like, one of the biggest challenges that even contributors face is that, because they're so focused on the monetary rewards, because really contributing in DAOs, they don't really have much in it for themselves. And so what I mean when I say this is that, as an individual contributor, and as Crystal mentioned, if I'm doing videos, articles, podcasts, right, these individual items are insignificant to add on my resume. But if I do this for multiple DAOs, it's a lot of work, right? And so what do I say? Like, okay, like DAO contributor and made 10 plus videos. So like what DAOs can experiment with is that they can sort of give or incentivize the members in ways beyond money or in ways beyond governance tokens. So for example, how about like, okay, if anyone does work with JournoDAO, right? How about you give them, an on-chain badge and a sort of attestation saying that, okay, JournoDAO says that you have done this work and you have done this work satisfactorily, and this is the payment you've received. That lets contributors build their on-chain reputation, right? But most importantly, it makes them think beyond payments. It makes them think beyond, because they finally have something in it for them. So that's like an interesting direction, I feel. Like, what do you guys think about that?
Yeah, we've actually been talking about that. So you're spot on, Infi. Doing that, and also using Unlock as the NFT token, so that also allows the person that receives it from their work to access either in-person events or special parts of the server for ongoing work too. So if you've completed a project, then you can automatically open this other server that might have token gated deeper projects that need more expertise. But yeah, that social credential is huge in DAO life that has no clear definition or structure or anything.
I feel like, we'll probably arrive back towards like some kind of just overall, the market will probably arrive at some Web 2.5 sort of model that works. I'm not sure if that's true or not, but what I'm seeing is like there probably should be like core operations. I'm seeing this in all these really projects that have gotten great VC funding, is they have like a core team that actually has to oversee the health of the project financially and also operationally. And that probably would be I'd say some sort of salary driven thing. And then I think there's managing contributors and encouraging contributors, and having some sort of payout schedule for that, or a payout system for that. But I do see that there still needs to be somebody that does like the heavy lifting on like the operations side that's not as fun, you know, that everyone, no one wants to do, right? So that there is just a little bit of that. But I'm seeing that model work, like where there's that central core operational side, and then there's like contributors that can really flourish. Yeah, so I would say having that foundation is important. I think probably getting some people paid to do that would be important.
Yeah, and that's the conversation we're getting ready to have next week, hopefully. I forgot about the lettuce meat that I sent everybody. But that's the document that I made after MCON. It breaks it down, like Jennifer's saying, so that, you know, the group itself is always moving forward because there's operators behind under the hood, and then creating those spaces for contributors and for people to build as well. So that's the stuff we're going to flesh out internally and then record it, and then everybody can see it. And then we'll open it up for debate too as we move forward.
One thing to pick up on what Infi was saying, and I think Crystal may have said this too, but cut out a little bit for me, so I'm not sure if I'm repeating something you said, but and we also may have talked about this previously, but DWork lets you tokenize completed tasks, which I think is super cool. So we're already kind of in this phase of there actually being some kind of a on-chain credentialing system for work that's completed, and you can kind of trace it to who's doing the approving of the tasks. So there's some kind of accountability there. As I just shared in the chat here, the OpenSea kind of visualization of these DWork task NFTs. And so it could be something where like JournoDAO has a task like write this article, and then someone connects their wallet to DWork and applies for that, gets approved for it, submits the work, has the work approved by whoever created the task. Whoever created the task then effectuates the payment. The person gets paid and they get an NFT of that completed task. So that's kind of a way to start encapsulating the work you've done on chain. And I think these NFTs can look a bit cooler, but I think like the function that they serve is very interesting.
And two, we're also able to look, you know, as the core group has space to expand and we want more people to come up into that core group, you can go to the group that Spencer just talked about, and you can like actually look and see, all right, you know, we already know the work you've done, but here it is, you know, in digital proof. So the rest of the community can also see this person's been here for a while. This is the work they've done. This is what they've contributed. This is why, you know, we're bringing them into the core group as well. So.
Yeah, and I think it's, I guess I would just, and Miles, I see you posted something, maybe you can hop in later, but I just want to make sure that we're not just reinventing, you know, these places that we've all worked that, you know, it just, and I feel like I can already see like the touching with the real world, like these ideals just start to like get diluted with just the pragmatism and the realities of like, okay, well, how would you actually pay somebody? And then it's like, so I think it might be even better to just like get some cultural like truths out there that we would like, you know, so that we can evaluate like any new tool or organization structure or whatever against these sort of principles, just like, you know, humans first, or like, you know, whatever it is that we kind of all agree on or we think is like solid enough to that you can actually say that something is or is not in line with that thing, like opinionated enough, but then like only that amount, and try and leave it as open as possible for you know, to adapt and evolve over time.
Yeah, I think that's huge. Leaving that space for the messiness, like this morning's internal messiness was so beautiful. I've been laughing for like an hour. I just can't make that. You can't make this up. I mean, you just need to write the movie, or we need to write the movie, because it just writes itself. But So definitely, like, I think that we have to walk a fine line of having structure, but not recreating the corporate stuff. Like, I've never had a corporate job, but I will fight like hell to make sure this doesn't become that. And I think there's tools too, because other people feel the same way. Like, there's a tool like Opolis, I'm getting ready to play with it, it handles payroll for the individual. So all the core contributors can also have this set up, and that handles, the heavy lifting of the stuff that none of us want to do. I know none of us want to do payroll. That's not a thing.
Right.
So, yeah.
Infi, did you still want to say something? We might have drifted from what you were going to say.
No, you actually drifted right into what I wanted to say. No, it's really interesting how Keith mentioned that, a lot of these ideals, they sort of start to, lose their shine when they collide with the real world, right? And I've seen that happen, right? So I just wanted to no, but like why I raised my hand was because Crystal mentioned something about these tools, then we need to orient ourselves. Well, I just wanted to sort of like tell you guys about my project. What I mentioned on the post as well, as in right now I'm working on a project that lets communities give consent preserving upgradable badges, right, which are essentially NFTs, represent memberships. And it could be as complex a structure as you want. So you could have, for example, you could have memberships with that's on chain store the guild you're a part of. So for example, finance, marketing. It could store your age in the community, so you're a core member or you're a contributor, or you're just a new member, right? And then dynamically over time, these could get upgraded based on contribution badges. So we also do contribution badges for the work that you do, so they can get upgraded, they can get downgraded. And since these are essentially NFTs, you could use these with your favorite Web3 tools, right? So for example, we were discussing about having a task board, right? And bounties when we were discussing payouts. So there are, in fact, tools like Dwork that actually let you do stuff like this, right? So there's like a lot of tools working. So yeah, I mean, right now, the folks at Super Benefit DAO, they're also thinking of, putting these kind of solutions together. But yeah, basically, like, I'd love to show, because I feel like this is something you guys would be interested in. So I'd love to show what I'm building, but also just have a general chat, because I've done a lot of research on tools. So I have ideas of a few tools that will really, really help you guys out.
Yeah, I think I'd be interested in a demo at least, and then we can kind of see. I do. I guess I'm leaning towards before we go into the jungle of tools, we should kind of get get agreement on what we're looking for, because I think we saw the early tokenization stuff go awry because it was well, we're doing this for token's sake, the token is the reason or something, and now we're seeing well, the token's just a medium to exercise the will of of the group. And so I think getting really granular about what we want to give people and why and under what circumstances, and how does that fulfill these kind of broader ideals. I think that'd be good. It's hard to without the concrete ideals written out and stuff, it's hard to spitball these things. But I think that's kind of the goal over the next few weeks. And so there'll be forum posts, and people should just feel free to either respond to those or start their own. And I think we need to start collectively having a story about who we want to be and why. And it's it's easy to talk about journalism, how the journalism business could benefit from new models. But I think unless we architect our own group and culture around a new way of doing things, then we might just drift into the older stuff, while also not realizing if something worked in the past, let's just use it and not try and reinvent it. But I think we'll have to like have a gut feeling about like, does this feel like fun if we do this? Like, does this feel like people would enjoy it? Or is this kind of just checking the box of like, oh, well, now we have this thing that we do.
Yeah, I still have community management PTSD from being a community manager of a community that became a DAO after their tokenization, and I will never let that happen again. So we will definitely make sure that does not happen. Those cats cannot be herded. So
Yeah.
yeah, not on my watch.
Well, it's funny how the system kind of attracts like, in the startup world, it's like the founders like demeanor kind of like creates the culture around it that then like, permeates even when there's like thousands of people working there or whatever. And so I just think before we just kind of accidentally like establish a culture, it'd be good to like bring everybody in and be more intentional about it. Because I think we all seem to vibe on the important things. Like, I feel like if a DAO that I enjoy being a part of would probably be a DAO that all of you would enjoy being a part of. So I think we have like that sort of gut like alignment. So I'm excited to just get into some details and make some hard trade-offs and trade off towards the human and the empathetic, rather than like the trade-offs of just like business and pragmatism that seems to be like the default. Maybe this is a good segue, Miles, into what you posted. I just see that it's a new type of legal entity.
Well, it's a couple things. First, I want to go back to what you were just talking about, and that is, well, my offspring had a really interesting observation about intentional communities, which is that they either take the shape of the visionary leaders who set the tone and draw more of the same and retain them. But how come so many intentional communities or organizations or DAOs fall apart? Is because there's some kind of toxicity at the top, which chases away the other contributors. And then because there's a need to fill population, either an intentional community, you need to have residents, an organization, you have to have roles. So there's a flow of more people in, but who stays? The ones who can survive in a toxic community, probably by being toxic themselves, is why so many organizations we've witnessed or been part of have fallen apart. It doesn't seem that anything exists between those two poles. You can't kind of be sort of good and sort of toxic. I think it just doesn't retain enough people. Any comments?
I think that's a good way to look at it, and that's definitely been my experience. And so I think maybe part of the process is like, at least on my part, I feel like I can be upfront about what parts of me should not be like part of this DAO, and maybe if we all try and take inventory of like, not who we are and what we would like, but the ideal version of ourselves, and try and gear it more towards the values that we bring and the value adds, rather than stuff that we each individually think is like interesting or fun or whatever, which kind of opens the door to that toxicity, I think.
Yeah, I mean, we have been talking, and Keith and I talked about this at MCon, and this is where I think the conversation is going to, that protecting the core of the DAO and the energy of the DAO is one of the most important parts, and making sure the toxicity that you're talking about, Miles, is never allowed to come in. And I think with all of our collective backgrounds and all of the organizations we have worked in or participated in, we have a very good radar, I think, and which is very rare for a group like this, but we have a good radar to sniff out toxicity. And I think hopefully that we're going to build frameworks that will protect the group so that that toxicity is not allowed to come in. And
That's interesting.
just,
I don't know that it's frameworks. I don't think you can legislate this.
well, I don't mean necessarily like but I mean like having, like Keith mentioned, a really good thing about having just a way to create space if conflict arises, so that the conflict itself can be talked about before friction becomes fire, and being aware of those types of things and addressing them before they're allowed to fester into something extremely toxic.
Yeah, an environment of transparency and alternative dispute resolution, right? Yeah, I got it. By the way, I'm a mediator. I got that. But and that's creating an environment. But it can't be organized besides just vibe of attracting more of the same that then replicates. And when toxic individuals find themselves not able to gain power, it's really keeping them from the usual path toward power that we've all witnessed. And to speak to what Keith just talked about and bring out the best parts of yourself, I was just asked to be on the core team of another DAO. And it was like, yeah, that looks good. Looks like I should be. No, that's not what I should do. I'm a much better outside observer, curmudgeon, cranky noter of problems and cheerleader. And I have credibility. I lose credibility when I'm more on the core team.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Like, I think I said something along these lines, but like those who seek power are like the least capable of leading. Sorry, I gotta turn that off. And so I'm hoping that it's taken us this long to get to where we are with the DAO, and we've done things so slowly and haphazardly is maybe like a good sign that neither of us or none of us are like trying to really make it ours. And but Miles, are you saying that there's nothing we can really proactively do about it, and it'll just kind of like shake out one way or the other depending on who we are?
Mostly mindfulness and intention, like discussing this intention and not shying away from naming toxicity when it appears. But what the biggest problem that happens is that kind of environment appears and people exclude themselves. Good people exclude themselves. Oh, this could be good, but I don't want to spend my time on this. So that's the biggest fear, biggest risk.
Yeah, that's a good point. I kind of want to get a list of like bad outcomes that we want to avoid, and then
Spencer, good word. Spencer just posted in chat. Sapiens call us infraculture.
Infraculture. Oh, yeah.
That's a new word just for you.
Yeah, I was just going to say, you're talking about something really important, like the culture of the DAO, the culture of, and I think that's great to have, like, how you said your perspective is from, it's like kind of that omnious, you're seeing it from the, whatever point of view you choose, right? Yeah.
I'd rather be out in the Bunsen.
Say, yeah, and seeing it from this perspective. But yeah, I think culture is becoming probably a conversation that needs more and more time to kind of understand. But I think that I really like what you guys have created so far in terms of culture here as it's going, even though it moves slow.
Does it move slow? I have a question about that.
I don't know. I don't know. I don't know.
Have you seen DAOs move quicker?
Yes,
I
have.
And have you seen them be successful moving quicker?
No.
Right. They
It's a hot mess.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
the pacing is like, you just know, this is one of the things I have a lot of confidence in, is that I just know that, all the setup that's been done has been thoughtful. And so that's just something I'm observing as well. All right, my battery's dying here.
I don't feel that we're we may name it as slow, we're not speedy. I don't know that they're the same thing.
I might add something to that also. So on the topic of like when do the bad outcomes start to kind of creep in? Because that's always inevitable, I think, in a way. It's when you put a lot of money in the pool and give people access to it by just bullying their way to it. Or if there's like power or authority that starts to be derivable by newcomers, that's when you'll start to see more of that type of issue, I think. That's my own experience. I noticed that on the topic of like how to coordinate all of these people and build an infrastructure, the reason, I think a big part of the reason that the whole cryptocurrency space, I refuse to call it an ecosystem, it's a bullshit word. It's that software tech startup culture, that weird Facebook culture that's been like boiling in Silicon Valley for the past 10 to 20 years or 30 years now, however long it's been, that has been transposed over into the cryptocurrency realm. And it's a very culty, the founder's going to save us, we're all doing the right thing. I was listening to NPR yesterday and somebody was talking about cult behavior and software tech startups. And I'm like, I've been studying that for a year. That's really the essence of how they're coordinating these teams. They're getting everybody to be like it's like the story of how Apple developed and how Steve Jobs ran that company, how Google's ran. They just grind people into the floor and they turn them into like fundamentalist robots in this weird system, and everything's taken care of for them, and their only job is to like believe in the company. And it's really strange, but that's the whole environment. That's how that all works, and it's made people a lot of money, so it's being replicated in crypto. And that's also people who worked in that environment are bringing that culture in, because that's their job history. That's where they're from.
Yeah, Nick, you're exactly right. And we saw that at MCon too. Every talk we went to, no matter what the topic was, everybody was talking about the human element of it all. And a lot of these DAOs were built as technology institutions first, without the human element emphasized. But I got to run. Speaking of human element, I got to go to yoga philosophy. So y'all have fun in LA. Have a blast. Send me pictures. I'm FOMOing.
Yeah, thanks.
Travel safe.
All right.
Bye, guys.
Bye, Chris.
I wanted to say something, just on that. It's everybody was resistant about VC money coming into projects. And, then of course we were, in the Web3 space. And then we were all praising, the funding strategies that allowed, VC money coming into projects. And it's part of that VC sort of, there is a part of that actually, and that accelerator VC kind of Y Combinator, which I love the people that are part of those projects. It's just that it's also inbred in them. And so the more VC that comes into the space, I think we're going to see that as well, as they're just doing what they know. What is the success to succeed and to get funding? And I'm seeing that a lot more now. So I guess that's why we try to think of this in a new way, if it's possible.
Yeah, and I think to me a good example of like why it is the way it is and how it can be different is just, you almost have to be okay with saying things like, it's okay if this doesn't get done. Like it's okay if we don't do this or whatever. It's okay if we don't grow. And,
yes.
And a lot of people, that's like hard for them to like get on board with, because it's like, well, I'm an executor. I'm a top like performer. And so no, like therein lies failure or something. And I think that's why it's hard for people to identify like the point of or a point where like this stuff creeps in, because like, I mean, I myself struggle with it, where it's like, I gotta tell myself like, it's okay. Like this isn't like saving any lives here, And I think if we can all like collectively like have that going, where there's a way to like, do your best, attract like the talent, feel like you're doing your best work, but then also have like the frame of mind that you can like, you're like, wow, this is going sideways and I'm getting too caught up in this and it's not that big of a deal. And I feel like I can say that because I'm supported by like the rest of the people here. It's like until you can say all the stuff that you want, and like a lot of places I work, like said, you know, very human first things, but then when it came down to it, it's like, well,
The yardstick isn't human.
what's that?
The yardstick that's used to measure is not so humanistic.
Yeah, because it's like, oh, well, can I just get this in on Monday? Like I'm super stressed out and I'm here like 2 hours late. It's like, oh, sorry, man. It's really got to get done like now. So it's like, I think until you kind of unclench the collective fist on outcomes and focus more on like the people in the process, and like the red flags are how people feel, not like what results you're getting, then which I don't know, it feels weird, it feels like touchy-feely, but I feel like that's, you know, you can't get anywhere different if you don't start doing that differently.
Yeah. I mean, I completely agree. I think you touched on something key there for me, at least. And that's something that the culture we're talking about here, the big kind of things we're working against is this kind of often invisible tacit assumption that if you're not indefinitely growing, then you're doing something wrong. Or like you're kind of like a failure, or you're not serious. If you can't just keep growing indefinitely, like that's somehow, you know, realistic or sustainable. And I mean, to me, at least, on like a logical level, that mentality kind of seems enforced when there is VC involvement and when a return on investment is one of the ultimate kind of driving motivations for what we're doing. And it's like, if we don't have those strings attached, maybe we can move forward without that kind of culture as much in principle.
Yeah, that's my main like reason why I can't take VC money in some of my other projects, is like, well, that's just inherently like misaligns values, because like I think this will make money at some point, but that's not the reason that I'm doing it. And so it's like, until you're on board with that, I don't know.
Oh, you know how you just said that, Spencer, is also, I'm seeing this in like NFT projects and communities that are like, we have to provide more utility, and it's like so much pressure to provide constant utility to keep people on board that it's it feels to me like it's starting to feel like that it just doesn't feel right anymore. You know,
Yeah.
I like utility, but it's like, I mean, it's like a machine, you know, it's like you're indebted almost and you can't catch up. And yeah, so I've noticed that too.
Especially when no one has a clear sense of what they mean by utility.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like, you have to keep providing perks and values and this and that, and it's just so constant. So if it's quiet for a day, it's like, what are you doing for me? It's like,
Yeah.
it's creating, I think, a culture of anxiety, even more than the world already, you know, than what we're in, right? It's just creating that constant and anxiety of like, you know, and I don't think it's good training. So yeah, I think Miles, you kind of really brought up a great topic, is defining the culture and creating a culture, a new culture that like aligns with, you know, Keith and everyone that just started out in the very beginning of this whole thing. Yeah.
So,
Go ahead.
so Keith, you might have identified, you know, Jennifer just, and Spencer amplified. But we know about relationships of sort of peer support, peer accountability buddies, and work groups, right? Well, we need Slack buddies. We need people who are going to reassure each other that it's okay to not accomplish what you thought you were going to accomplish. You're not fucking up. You're just being human, and it's good. Like, that doesn't exist. Wouldn't that be great? Instead of keeping people on task, like
Yeah.
giving people permission. Not permissionary. So anyway, there's that thought. Also to what Jennifer talked about.
I love that.
Where do I sign up? Yeah. Good, John.
Pin that, because I got a note for you on that. Okay, go.
Cool. Well, also about culture and infraculture, as Spencer noted, when we're talking about paid positions, like could there be positions in JournoDAO? Well, what comes to mind is the first position is some kind of functioning, getting things done, whether it's a director or executive director or general manager or something that sort of holds all the glue person, right? It seems to me the second paid position should be culture engagement, like managing the culture internally to start, and as well out in the journalist community. Sort of the equivalent of customer engagement, but like our customers are internal. And it seems like that maybe is like really important to make that a paid position, so it doesn't just get lip service.
I like that idea. What do you think about also, seems like if we're just thinking about what's counterintuitive, I think, like, what if there was a outside party that we empowered to like evaluate whether we are like adhering to our principles or not? It seems like I've had this thought about HR specifically, as like HR doesn't, represents the interests of shareholders basically, and like employee disputes, and it would be, but I've seen a lot of DAOs that like need some HR, but it seems like something that would be good to be outside and actually neutral or something, which I don't know how the incentives align on that, but it seems like an organization can only handle their like internal drama and strife like so much to where it like, it becomes incapable of really seeing the forest for the trees. And so it might be interesting to think about like how, I don't know, maybe this is what made me think of it, Miles, is like you you saying that you're remaining on the outside, and I'm like, yeah, maybe some like external vigilance or accountability.
I think you're talking about DAO clergy.
DAO clergy?
DAO clergy. The ministers of DAO.
How's that clergy?
I don't know. It just seems to me that would be like, they're in this respected community position. They're very intertwined, but they're not actually doing stuff in the day-to-day. They're just advising everybody in how they're doing the day-to-day. And judging you.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I don't mean that practically.
Yeah.
I'm just riffing. I'm sorry. I have to define when I'm contributing or riffing.
Okay.
I want to get back to Jennifer. She had a pin in something she was really
Oh yeah, sorry.
on.
I really think this has been an important conversation, because it's going to separate this from everything else. So thanks for bringing this up. The thing I was going to pin was really just coupled on to your thing about the slacking, having like a Slack buddy. I feel like to promote sort of collaboration and community first, or human first, or whatever principles, is to actually, like, when your Slack buddy is slacking, where the other person says, allows for it to some degree, and then picks up the slack for them. That's kind of like helping the neighbor, it's like we kind of help each other. So if I see like Crystal's like been really crazy busy, like it's important that I step in and start introducing people and saying hello, so it's like we're looking out for one another, and it just kind of teaches that lesson. So anyway, I really like that whole concept of in another, taking it to another level is, it's okay to slack, but I got your back, but then get my back too, I do have to go though, so I would love to hear what you have to say about that, if anything, and then I'll have to jump out.
I love it. I think you came up with a tagline. What was it? It's okay to slack, but I got your back. Or something.
God.
If it rhymes, it sticks.
Yeah.
Jennifer, I'll point you to this thing I posted in the chat earlier, which is about Cause Corporation. Just something I
Yeah.
think you're interested in knowing about.
Please. Okay,
New kind of entity.
great.
Yeah.
I'll look for the chat now. I'm on my mobile, so
Right. Well, actually, I was just going to ask somebody else. I also have to go shortly. And I want to know if somebody, when they're all done, could capture the chat and send it to me, email it to me or something.
yeah, there's some good stuff in here.
And I don't want to capture it now because it's incomplete.
I see a little dot button, save chat. Has anyone done that before?
Yeah, so I want someone to do it at the end of the chat. So,
Okay.
and if it gets done, great. And if not, well, I'll get a slap.
Exactly.
Okay, well, see you in LA. See you all online, and great to speak with you.
Yeah. Thanks, Jennifer.
All right, thanks.
Great.
Bye. Miles, you gonna hop off, or do you want to?
Just a minute. I want to also
Right.
mention. Okay, there you go. There's some contact information. Get that right? No typos. Yay. Also, I had some quick notes about the banking question brought up last time.
Mhm.
I can just report them very quickly right now. Is that a good idea?
Yeah.
Okay. So first of all, I think what I just heard is JournoDAO is a C Corp or will be a C Corp. Which one?
JournoDAO has a C Corp that it can operate through, I guess. I'm kind of envisioning the DAO as like separate, but has a relationship with the C Corp. The C
So
Corp does not define the DAO. I can,
there's a term for this in the nonprofit world. Familiar with that? Financial sponsor. The words financial sponsor are actually a technical term in the
okay.
nonprofit world. And there are actually organizations, you could like, an organization can be a financial sponsor for a not yet incorporated intended nonprofit. Like one, but there actually are organizations that just do that. They are financial sponsors for nonprofits in development. Okay. So
Okay.
I think what you're discussing is in essence, a financial sponsor relationship. And I think just a quick Google on that will give you maybe some guidelines and history and that kind of, okay?
Okay. Awesome. Thanks.
Second thing is, so JournoDAO does not have a federal ID number and is not likely to have one themselves anytime soon.
We have an EIN as from the C Corp.
Oh, we do?
I'm just making the distinction of like that the C Corp. The
Is it
DAO
their EIN
is
or is
upstream.
there one assigned to JournoDAO? Is there a separate EIN sort assigned to JournoDAO?
There is one assigned to the C Corp. Yeah.
But is that for the C Corp doing other things as well? Or is it dedicated to JournoDAO?
Yeah, we as JournoDAO set it up, but I think Keith's point is that like the C Corp is kind of like JournoDAO is bigger than the C Corp on like an ideological level, like in terms of mindset. But yeah, it is like a JournoDAO. It's JournoDAO Inc.
Perfect,
The C-
perfect. Okay, great. Much easier than to get a bank account and all that stuff. The question that I think was being asked last week was, what is the lowest friction process to get a bank account open? Because just answering all the questions that are going to be asked, when oftentimes those answers are not very concrete or clear.
Oh, we have an update. We got a bank account
Oh, never mind. Thank
for
you.
Mercury. Yeah.
And that's what I was going to tell you. I was going to recommend Mercury or Nuvo. Never mind.
Oh, good.
Okay.
Yeah, they it seemed like the scrutiny that they were putting me under was hostile in nature, but they accepted my my answers and then gave us the account.
Yeah,
So,
you're done. Okay, great. Waste my fucking time. No, that's all fine. Okay, great. I love seeing John laugh.
yeah. Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to say goodbye now and hope you guys keep going. I'll talk to you later.
All right. Thanks, Miles. Bye. Yeah, I was just gonna say, if we wanted to continue in this vein, that like an important, like, what should these be called, like edicts, like foundational statements or something, is that like like no one person is better than the other person. Like I think that's like something that we have like in all of our like friendships, or like a lot of our friendships and stuff, but to bring that into like the business realm as like an implicit or just like a given assumption, I think is kind of transformational. Because like I've been in, whenever somebody is like, complaining about coworkers or whatever, there's like this implicit like, okay, I'm a good employee, they're a bad employee. And so that gives me cause, to like complain about all the things that they're doing that is like not as good as what I would do. I think if there's a way, I'm not naive enough to think that like a statement would obviate that, but if there is a way to kind of point out that to keep in mind, like you might be the one not making a mistake this time, but you will be the one making a mistake like at some point. And so we should all be like, we should all treat each other as like how we would want to be treated when we're like making a mistake, or like we have, no matter what the fuck up is or whatever.
Like mantras of incorporation.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think, I've seen that be really successful in like my marriage. We like worked really hard to get to that point where like, okay, neither one of us is harder to be with than the other one. And then once you get that foundation down, then everything else is kind of like, that just like gets rid of so many arguments, because it's like, if you don't get there, then it's like, well, you do this and I don't do that or something. And then the other person's like, but you do this and I don't do that. And it's like, let's just, let's get on to more important things. Sorry, Impy, you had this.
Oh no, well, I don't know if you guys are big fans of reading research papers. I try to wrap my head around one every now and then, and this was something I had in my archives. It was basically about legal wrappers for DAOs. Again, didn't make all the way through it because it did honestly get a little bit boring for me. But I have a yeah, I know, but I have a feeling since Keith's already like figured out a bank account and stuff, you might want to take a look.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I'll check that out. It probably isn't a good research paper if it isn't boring. Trying to cook it one way or the other.
Keith, I don't know if this would support, some of your feelings about getting some overall agreement, I guess, or I 1,000% agree. I think there's a lot of benefits to that, and one that I've at least recognized is that like the sooner that those kind of like guides are established, or foundations or whatever, it allows newcomers to kind of know like, am I wasting my time?
Yeah.
Is this going to be a thing that is worth my effort? And I have struggled with that with a lot of DAOs. Like, I don't want to really give a whole bunch if I don't really know that like it's what I want my energies going towards. And so like I think I just would agree that like I think the sooner that, and I don't, I would probably argue, and I would imagine most of you all would agree that like the more generalized this constitution or whatever you would call it would be is probably the better. But there's probably some things that are just a hard like, this isn't the right place for that, that's just not going to be what this is, or whatever. I'm not really sure, but I think one important thing that I wish got more focus in DAO management is much more of a concern for the members' time, and some members are much more willing to just, they've got a lot of time, free time or whatever, and or they've got that sort of personality. But there's a lot of people that are like, they don't want to get pushed. They don't want to get their time wasted, you know. And so I think something that would just be great on a whole is just having this idea of like, let's make things as clear as we can. Obviously, we're pretty hemmed because we're just in a DAO and nothing makes any sense. But you know, I think there, you know, the more that we can succinctly show someone like, this is going to be worth your time. You know, we really value your time. We don't want to waste it. Hold on a second here. Let's figure that out, you know, or something. I just think that it says a lot to the outsiders. And like, if I want to introduce some other journalists that I know, like, they're going to be even that much more hesitant than I am, you know, and other people that are just like eager to get in. So I don't know, like, I don't know. I'm going to let you get.
I actually think this ties, in my mind, ties in very well with the point Crystal keeps making about how a lot of DAOs and tech groups, tech organizations just default to like a technical solution mindset for problems. And I think for like communicating to colleagues, to peers, that you appreciate the time that they're putting in, if you default to like a technical mindset, that you may not be able to convey that as well. And I think this also ties into what Keith was saying about kind of the edicts or kind of mantras, like an ethos setting, you know, terms. Like if we have to kind of live it more than just technically inscribing it somewhere. I think that's how you would really convey a lot of this stuff more meaningfully.
Yeah, and I mean, there's no way to prove it or whatever, but I feel like, you know, that's kind of how we've organically ended up here, is just, you know, Eric was like pleasant to be around and work with. I just wanted to hang out with him. So like, yeah, I'm also interested in journalism, but like if Eric had been a giant asshole or something, I'd be like, oh, well, I don't care about journalism that much, you know.
He wouldn't have like met the threshold. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think we're all fortunate in that way, but maybe like that's the reason why we found each other. So I think that's maybe what Crystal's concern is like there's been like a pretty high filter for all of us to, you know, be here and have stayed here or whatever, because nobody's getting paid. There's like, you know, not many people. There's not a whole lot of, I don't know, external like success metrics or whatever. So it's like, so that's in our favor. But like, you know, if we go to ONA and like we just kind of stick around and, you know, become something, then yeah, if we don't try and like codify what's happened like organically before that, then it's pretty easy for, you know, somebody who likes the brand and seems like amiable and like doing good work to like come in and then slowly like fracture the DAO because they're not in line with like, you know, they're more of like a personality, like execute at all costs mentality. And then compared to that, like our approach looks pretty like soft and ineffective. And then so people like gravitate over towards that, like, well, they're getting stuff done and like all that stuff. And if there's no like edict or mantra or whatever to point to and be like, no, that's not why we're here, then, you know, that could cause problems.
Yeah, that's a good point. I hadn't thought about how someone who's used to thinking in that just execute at all cost mindset may not see this kind of culture as deliberate, but may see it as just like not like it's soft or not rigorous enough. But we need to communicate that it's intentional, that it's deliberate. Yeah, that's a good point.
Real quick, I think it was in one of the mini-series podcasts that C Club did, and I apologize. I think it might have, I can't remember who it was, but they were really promoting the idea of forking as actually like the really good thing. And yeah, it's like it's a utility that like on a technical level has a lot of value, but they were kind of really pushing this idea of being really open and welcoming to forks in a way. And obviously the term fork is very loose here. It doesn't have to be like this exact divide sort of thing, but that like setting up a culture or some sort of structure that allows for differing views, but still like relatively aligned, but maybe like have a different idea of how they want to tackle this thing, and not being a thing of like, well, go do your own thing, good luck, and but allowing for that, and and then in theory, natural selection, whatever is the better one wins. And so as long as there's still some sort of and that's where I think we're like the kind of the constitution or the foundation kind of thing. As long as it's like everyone is still aligned on that, like you could still be under this thing, and it wouldn't necessarily necessitate like a hard fork or whatever, like do your own thing, but just like I think that's, I mean, to me, that idea is something that is just absolutely not really possible in things outside of DAOs, and maybe I'm wrong, but like, man, let's play with that idea, because to me that really seems to open up some wild possibilities that just were not possible in the typical corporate structure or whatever.
I actually think you're touching on, I'm not familiar with David Phelps, but I think this is a really interesting idea that could tie into JournoDAO as a professional network that can maybe incubate or advise journalistic projects. Like if we can bring in a few journalists that are interested in starting something, or like we can bring in maybe Web2 journalists that aren't as familiar with the Web3 stuff and kind of incubate them, and then let them form their own group or their own DAO outside of us. I think that could be really cool, like some kind of incubation forking as a service or something interesting like that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point. And
Go fork yourself.
yeah. I would say that I don't necessarily think that like we're kind of talking about the most generalized like JournoDAO thing, but then whether it's sub DAOs or working groups or projects or pods or whatever you call them, like those edicts don't necessarily need to like pass down to like, then those groups can like figure out whatever like works for them. And so maybe there is something that works better more as like a traditional startup or something like that for like the particular like problem that they're working on.
Something that could be a good project that ties a lot of stuff we've talked about today and over the last few months together is if we could identify some team of journalists who are curious about Web3, ideally a team of journalists that don't really know anything about Web3, and we can guide them through a process of learning this technology, how to work together in an editorial way using this technology, and maybe even make some of that public to the extent that we can. And then we can show that, we can kind of publicize that and get exposure to that so that people can watch that without needing to like privately acquire that information through us, that there could be something to explore in the future.
Yeah, that's a good idea. They could even pitch it to their outlets or something. Like they could report on the process of trying to be like crypto pilled or green pilled by JournoDAO. And then, it'd be interesting if we can change their mind, or they start out skeptical and then, end up less skeptical, then that would be good. If not, then like, I don't know, maybe we'll learn something.
Yeah.
And I would also say that just the more journalists we can bring in, the more journalists that are going to come up with new ways to use this technology. Like it's such a small group of people right now. Like it's so exciting to think once we really start getting some things going, like what will be invented.
Yeah, totally. That's the only thing that is really like creating a sense of urgency for me, is just like wanting to see what's around the next corner. So that's kind of when I have to like tell myself it'll happen. Like we just gotta focus on the now.
Thank you so much, NP. It was actually great. I really appreciate all these resources you provided and what you talked to us.
Yeah.
Oh, not an issue, not an issue at all. That's fine. It was fun attending the call. Yeah, I'd stick around more, but I have another call in about 5, and then just gonna crash.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was fun meeting all of you. Yeah, Nick, Keith, John, Spencer, and everyone else who left. That was, yeah, it was nice. Well, I'll see you guys around in the general chat.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Yeah, we'll set up a demo for next week sometime.
Yeah, for sure. Anytime's good.
Okay.
All right. Have a good day. Have a good flight, Keith.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Well, I think that's probably a good place to wrap it. And let's see, I'll save the chat as instructed here.
I would have forgot.
Nick, any parting thoughts or?
I always tend to have a lot of thoughts. I think I'm still percolating on a couple of things.
Okay.
I'm good.
All right. Well, thanks for coming. And yeah, we'll see you next week.
All right. See you guys.